The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Philip from Congree. I'm the product manager at Congree, and I'm joined by Gustav. Hello, Gustav.
Hello, everybody. I am Gustav Sjogren from Interverbum Technology. I'm the IT manager here at Interverbum Tech.
And together we are going to talk about the integration of Congree and TermWeb and how they interact together to give you a perfect set of tools, perfect companions throughout the terminology lifecycle. To do that, we are going to go through a few slides explaining the rough idea of what you're going to see today. And then we will go hands-on into the products and show you how you can use Congree and TermWeb to reach your goals and to get a consistent terminology use running in your company. So let's dive right in. First of all, why do we even need terminology? I'm sure you all know. Most of all, we do this for our customers, and or better said, for our readers. So of course we don't do it because it's fun to do, or because it occurs to us, or because we don't have enough to do already. It's that customers read our documentation and can benefit from us having used terminology before. And for that, we have to make sure that words are always used in the same way, so that we name everything always in the same way. This is very important to ensure that we have a consistent branding, so that we as a company always name our core products, our most important parts, like our company name, our key features, that we all name them always in the same way, that we are easily recognized in the market. Also, we do that for solid corporate wording in general. So even if it's components we use or part of the a software or a machine we use, that we always use the same words so that people recognize this as our corporate wording. Also, it's of course important that when we describe something, especially in technical documentation or in support documentation, that when we describe something, that it's easily recognized by our users. So when our end users read documentation and we talk about a certain word, a certain term, that we always use the same, so that the customer instantly knows, okay, they are talking about this and that, and I understand that. This helps us a lot to minimize confusion. So if we try to describe something and the user has to do something, we want to avoid any mistakes. And the best way to avoid mistakes is if we make sure that we name certain things always the same. So if, for example, I have a software in which there's a panel where some information is displayed, I would always want to tell this a panel. I would never want to call it a window. I would never want to call it a pop-up, because this would just confuse the user and he would not know that I'm actually talking about my panel. All in all, we do that to facilitate professional content creation. So when we have terminology and when we have access to terminology, it's easier for us to create content which is apt for our target audience. Yeah, and to do that, who actually needs access to terminology? And that's, of course, everyone. So everyone who creates content, this is technical authors, translators, support engineers, sales staff, product manager, the list can go on. So everyone in a company who creates content should be aware of the terminology rules, should be aware how product should be named. No one should be left alone here and have to decide by themselves how to name a certain product, because this is how you get inconsistency and this is how you confuse your customer. Yeah, but where does the terminology actually come from? And here the answer is also quite simple. So it comes from everywhere. So once again, everywhere where content is created. So we have the terminologists, we have marketing, we have research and development, technical documentation and support. And as you can see here already, there's a pattern here. So it's actually the same people. So the people who should be aware of a correct terminology use are also the people who mostly participate in the terminology build-up and are able to provide new content, because only when content is created can we have new terms, and only if we have new terms, then we can build up our terminology database. So this is a general introduction. Now the interesting part is how do TermWeb and Congree actually help us with this? So on the one side, we have TermWeb, which provides access and collaboration for all your content creators. This is what Gustav is going to show us, and I'm going to show you how Congree makes sure that you can benefit from terminology always, everywhere, and instantly. Because obviously it's not enough to only have a terminology database who gives you access to all the terms. You also have to make sure that when content is created, you can efficiently get all the information which is in a terminology database, so that nothing can be missed. To visualize this a little bit better, let's have a look at this graphic, so how the two tools actually work together. So at the top, there's you, the content creator, who creates something in an editor, so maybe Word, maybe some XML editor, maybe InDesign, wherever. And while you create content, Congree already starts to extract new term candidates. And the term extraction is later provided to a term proposal system in which some responsible personnel, for example, the terminologist, can propose terms into TermWeb. And then in TermWeb, you will have a workflow which Gustav will show you later, where terms can be validated and published. And then it goes back into the editor. So whenever you write a term which has already been published, or if you write some negative term which you should not use and it's already published, you will see this once again in your editing environment. And with editing environment, I really mean everywhere where content is created. So if you have a terminology system, you also need some system which gives you access to all your editor integrations. And this is why Congree integrates into as many editing environments as possible. So you can see in this list that we have here FrameMaker, InDesign, the entire Office product line. We have a lot of XML editors. We have web interfaces like Confluence and many content management systems where we directly integrate, and this may make it possible for you to have access to terminology while you write in those systems. Okay, so this is the introduction which I wanted to show you before we actually go into the product. Today I'm going to show how this all works in Word. So I'm going to fire up Word here. And I'm going to start with the term extraction so that we have some meat in our system, and that Gustav can show you what we can do with the proposals we get from the system. How Congree works is that it integrates seamlessly into the editor. So we have an editor like Word. You can open and close it, and we see that there's an additional panel here on the left side. This Congree panel helps you with all your terminology work when creating content. What we have here is already a written document. Of course, it's full of errors because later I want to show you how Congree can help to improve this document. But what we are going to do first is I'm going to run a document check here on this entire document, and the system will now go through the existing document and find all terminology issues, but also all new terms which are not yet known by the system. And this is what we are going to look at first. So Congree gives you feedback that there are certain terms in this document which are not yet known by TermWeb. So we don't have them inside of our terminology database. So we have something like the brainwave, we have the free USB interface, we have the prolonged use, and so on and so on. So the system extracts those really on the fly. So while you create content and something is relevant for terminology, this is instantly shown in the Congree panels. And now you, as an author, can decide what you want to do with that. So let's have a closer look at the brainwave, for example. I can click it, then I see where it was found in the document. You can see that actually I, as an author, I wrote it in the plural form, but Congree automatically creates the singular, because what you want in the terminology database is always the singular form of words. So we automatically extract the singular, and you have access to additional information. So what you can add is a definition for your brainwave. This is something which is, of course, not mandatory. It really depends on your terminology workflow. So if content is created in Word, it makes sense that whoever creates this content also provides a short definition for your terms. So this is something which you can optionally do, and you can just enter your definition here in this field. You can also add some note for the terminologist. Just some information you would like to provide to the terminologist. We automatically extract the context in which the term has been found in the document, and additional useful attributes, whatever you configure and whatever is available in TermWeb. So in my case, I have automatically pre-filled the term type, where I can select different forms. So the brainwaves, it's a full form, so it's actually correct, but I could extract abbreviations or acronyms or short forms or whatever. Then I could already pre-select the correct variant. And I can also suggest to the terminologist how this term should be used in the future. So it's a preferred term, should it only be admitted, or is it maybe forbidden? So the question is, why would I write a forbidden term? But if I would do something like that, and then I remember, that I can send it and make sure that no one else makes this mistake in the future. And once I set this up, I can maybe add some additional terms. Let's see, maybe I would like to have contact point as an additional term. So I can just click it and add it to my list. And I can do the same. Once again, I can add a definition, I can add a note, I can add a context. And when I'm done, I can select all the terms I've collected or which have been collected automatically without any effort for the author, and I can propose them. So, and after I did this, I see how many terms have been proposed. If I want, I can have a look again and see what I've actually sent. And now we are actually changing roles, and we go into the role of the terminologist, who now sees a list of all terms that have been proposed by any authors in the company. So I see that, for example, the brainwave has been proposed. I can see when this happened. I can see who did it. In my case, I'm the administrator, so that's me. I can see for what language I did it, for what specific rule set I did it, and where it should go. So all this information is stored here. I can see my note here, I can see my context, I can see my definition, and now what I can do is to decide what should happen with those term candidates. So I have several options. I can, for example, decide that this was a test, this is not relevant at all, so I can just delete it from my list. Which means if it appears again as a term candidate, it would be proposed again. I can also discard, which means it will never be shown as a term candidate again. So the system will remember and not show it as a term candidate again, and it would also not be added to the terminology database. So for example, we can do this with a rare case. Maybe this is not a term candidate for me, so I can discard it here. And what I can also do is to take all the good terms which I actually want to have in my terminology database and send them into the TermWeb terminology lifecycle workflow. So what I do here is I can click approve. Maybe let's not take so much so that Gustav doesn't have to work so much. Let's take those 5, and yeah, what I'm going to do now is I approve them, and then they are sent directly into the TermWeb terminology workflow. And this is something which we can actually see. So if we enter TermWeb here for a moment, just to see what happened here, I can log in using my credentials. And what I can see is that those terms which I proposed, they are already available, and something should happen to them now. And this is what Gustav is going to show to us now.
Thank you, Philip. If you give me the presenter role.
Here you go.
Very well, and I should be showing my screen number 2 here. So what you're seeing in front of you here is actually 2 logged in clients into TermWeb at the moment. Here on the left side is I'm logged in as an external system administrator, which is why I have full access to all the administrative functions in TermWeb. And on the right here, we have what we would call a German translator in this case, someone who's logged in with restricted rights and permissions, because TermWeb is a permission-based system, so that you can, as an administrator, make sure that your users only access and edit the terms that you want them to access and edit. Just to give you an overview of what we're going to actually see here in TermWeb, I'm going to go and jump into the workflows here as an administrator. And what this is going to open up is the list of workflows that belong to this dictionary. Now, I've ordered up these in the order, it's a linear workflow system here, starting with 1.1 and continuing 1.2 and 1.3, and with different choices actually in this case, depending on what the reviewer in this case does. To this, we have a number of user groups that are affected by this. We have a term suggester, of course, who's suggesting a term, translators who are going to be translating terms, reviewers or validators who are going to either accept the term as a good term or reject the term, and then maybe have a project manager at the end who gives a final approval to the concept of the term, saying that this is approved for the use in the general section of the dictionary. I'm actually going to go and jump into one of these so you can actually take a look here. You see there's some descriptions here. When a term suggested, a section is set for this term, because we don't want this term to be available directly to the general public, everyone who's using this dictionary before it's actually translated and approved. Then we want this term sent to the translators, who should be the ones that access it. So I'm actually going to press on the search view here to the right in the translator here, and as you can see, compared to how what Philip saw in his view, you can see that this translator only has access to these 5 terms, and that's because they are in a different section from the general terms, and these all are missing German translations. That's why this German translator is only seeing these terms. And what I've set as a part of the workflow, we jump in here and edit details. You can see this is the entire workflow that the translators are going to experience when they create their translations. I've created a couple of tasks, and these are, you can see, triggers. What happens automatically when these tasks happen. So what I'm going to do is I have created a workflow for the translators that when they add a term or create a term that's not in the English language, note that this group is the translator group, and this translator to the right here is part of that group. When they create a term that's not in English, I want to set the process status to this term to unprocessed, and I want them to inform all the validators for each individual language. And this will automatically, using language group as a part of this, will automatically detect which language you are creating in and mail the relevant group with information about new terms. In this example, I have created a subject title for this mail, and I created a text with a number of variables. You can very simply add your own variables to these messages, and of course decide if you want to send this as a digest once per day, for example, or as a digest when a number of terms have been translated, so that the validator or the reviewer only gets their mail or information about this when there's enough work for them to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and translate one of these terms. Now, I'm not a German translator, but I can see here information about this term. I can see who created it. In this case, and a lot of interesting information that Philip sent along with me, and this note that he sent along with this. So I'm going to go ahead and make a translation of this term. Now, I don't know any German, but I can go ahead and just add any term to this with a German translation. You can also note here that I restricted this user here so that some of these parts I can actually change as a translator, which should be relevant, but there's some other parts that I can change, like the process status or the usage status. I'm going to let the reviewer or the validator or the project manager decide on that. So I'm going to go ahead and write a German translation for this, which of course is not a German translation, but it's just an example here. So what I've done here is I've created a German translated term. And you can see here that the process status was, according to the workflow, automatically set to unprocessed, even though I did not have access rights to that. And that's just because you want to be able to control what happens in your workflow. And if I save this, you'll also note that I don't have access to this term anymore, because now there is actually a German translation, and this translation should go ahead and be sent on to the reviewers. Now, as an administrator, I'm going to actually take over this role as a reviewer. I can actually see all these terms here. They're both part of these two sections, a general section that this company dictionary belongs to, and the term suggestions. If I do click on the term suggestions here, I'll see the same terms that are available, or they were available earlier here to the translator, but the translator does not see Brainwave anymore because, well, it does have a German translation, and I've forcibly applied a filter to this translator so that they don't have access to terms with translations already. That just makes sense. Now, I, as in my role as a validator, if I were a validator, I can go ahead and actually approve these terms one by one, or I could mass approve them if I want to in our grid view. What I'm going to actually do is I'm going to add these concepts to my grid view, and the grid view is something that is available both in TermWeb 3, but also in TermWeb 4, where it will allow me to batch edit or get an Excel-like environment for me to edit my terms. And as you can see now, I just opened up the display, and I've seen a couple of these fields here are not the only ones I want to see. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into display settings. I want to see, well, the process status is something I, as a validator or project manager, want to see. I want to also see, of course, the two languages, the two translations. And I'll click apply here, and you'll see that these show up here. And you'll note that these are still unprocessed, which means that, well, no one has approved them yet. But if I did actually go ahead and approve them, and I can either do this one by one by clicking on these and then clicking on maybe a finalized process status. I can also, if I have 100 terms, for example, and I've gone through them all one by one and said that these are all okay, I can actually select all my terms here and batch edit them, meaning I can apply the same value to all these terms through our batch editing tool. So you can actually apply a finalized status to 100 terms or 1,000 terms if you want to at once. But now for this example, I'm just going to go ahead and finalize both these terms and accept that this term is actually done. It's finished and it's processed. And when I save this, I've selected my term, and I'm going to just go ahead and save this. This will actually publish this concept now. I can close this view. I can re-enter my search view here. And you'll see that the Brainwave term is no longer in our term suggestions section. It's been actually moved automatically per our workflow, because when a term is finalized and all the translations are done, I want to have that term available for the general public in this company doc general section, call it. If I click apply here, you'll find now that the term has been moved here and all the information here. Again, it's not available to the translator, but it is available now to the general public, or the ones that you give access to this. So I believe that was what I was going to show in TermWeb 3 here. I'm just going to go ahead and switch over to show a couple of items concerning TermWeb in our PowerPoint here. So the strengths of TermWeb is that TermWeb allows for collaboration very easily. You can easily share terms between users and make it very easy for a large number of terminologists, each with their own specializations in their own fields, to be able to give the correct translators in their correct languages access and make it very easy for them to edit and control where the terms move along in your life cycle. This allows for automation, so you don't actually have to, well, typical company today would send an Excel file along to the next step in their administration. TermWeb does this automatically and lets you get back to what is important for a terminologist, which is, well, translation and handling of terminology. We, of course, in TermWeb have a lot of integrations, and these can work concurrently with each other. So no matter if you are a translator who's using STL Trados Studio, or in this case, using Congree, you're free to use both systems in combination with TermWeb. You can pull your terminology from Congree, you can publish them to any other system. We, of course, have also full media support. So if you want to attach PDF documents or other kinds of media files to your concepts or terms, that is fine. We support that as well. And as we evolve, we will see that we have new systems that we'll be able to integrate with, and our new release of TermWeb 4 will also allow the UI, it will be a drastic improvement to the UI from TermWeb 3. I'm also just going to give a brief overview of how this workflow that you just saw looked like. There's actually several parts here that we didn't actually get to explore, but I was just going to mention that you can fully customize exactly how these workflows and what kind of statuses and what kind of data variables you want to use. In this case, we had a number of groups. Someone had a term suggestion entered, or maybe a project manager entered it as a term suggestion. And all these steps in between here where you would normally manually have to control information like send updates to your terminologists or translators or your validators with information. Now you can do it automatically or control exactly what information they get to see. So yes, down here you didn't get to see the reviewer or the validator could actually choose to have different process statuses and send them on different parts here. This is more of an iterative process. But yeah, I believe I'm done now. Philip, would you like to take over again?
Yeah. So, okay, yeah, you should once again see my screen now, and let's come back to Word. So now we saw this entire workflow and we saw what happens with the brainwaves, right? So before it wasn't a term, and now whenever I write brainwaves or brainwave, we can see now that the system Congree actually recognizes this term. And currently I have configured Congree in a way that it also shows terms when I do something correctly, so like a well done. And I get the information that the brainwave is a valid term according to a terminology database. And I always have access in real time to the terminology results directly in a additional panel which Congree provides. So this panel can be made available when the author chooses so normally you can hide it or you can show it, you can move it to a second screen, you can do whatever you want with this panel, and it automatically, while you write, looks up in TermWeb if anything is available for what you just wrote. So when I just started writing brainwave and I'm instantly informed that brainwave is a positive term, I'm allowed to use it. It has this beautiful definition. I get the information that it's a full form term type. I get the information that the process status is finalized. Here it's even filtered in a way that you will only see finalized terms. I see the usage status. I see this node, which is still available for me. And I see the context. So I get all this information, and this can help me as an author when I create documentation to decide what term to use in what context. And I would like to go a little bit more into this. And therefore, we will return to the document we saw before, the Compathy Content Grasp. Here we have actually the same. We can see that in this document, somewhere the brainwave also exists. Yeah, it's here in this part. So once again, I'm informed that I used this correctly. But I can also hide all the terms which are correct anyway, so that they do not influence what I'm doing now. I can focus on all the terms where something is actually wrong or something is off, and I still have to do something. So, and I get a complete list in Congree about all term violations together with all violations in other categories. So what you see here on the left is actually not only a terminology checker, it checks your entire style guide. So it has a spell checker, it has a grammar checker, it has a style checker, and it has a abbreviation checker. So everything you normally would have in your style guide in written form or in your wiki or wherever you keep your style guide, you would make those rules known to Congree, and Congree would check them all. So it's not exclusively terminology, it's also all other style violations which might occur in a document. And let's have a look at some of those cases. So let's maybe first stay at terminology for a little bit more. Here, for example, I wrote the content graph SX as the product name. And I'm informed by the terminology system, by TermWeb, that the best term which I can use here is the company content graph SX, meaning also adding the company name at the beginning, not only the product name. So Compathy wants it like that. So they ask the authors always to add the company name when they describe a product. And this is why I get this message. And additionally, we get some useful style guide-like information. Like in this case, check whether it's better to use the corresponding preferred term. The status of this term in a database is admitted. It means I can do it, but the preferred variant in most cases is to actually add the company name. And what I can do now is I can choose to ignore this because I don't want to fix this. I don't agree, and I'm actually allowed to because it's admitted and not forbidden. I can ignore them all in the entire document, or I can fix them all. So I can sort all rules by all those violations we have, and we can see we have 8 locations in the document where I used content graphs without the actual company name. And what I can do now, I can just click the Apply All button, and then in the entire document, it's changed everywhere. So I already did a lot of fixes in a few clicks. And here we have a more severe problem. So here someone wrote, this information is recorded by the headphone, and this is actually forbidden. So Compathy doesn't sell headphones, they sell headsets, so you can never write headphone. And this is written in this form. So I get a more severe error in which it says replace with the corresponding preferred term. The status of the term in the database is deprecated. So this I cannot avoid here. I should really fix it. And I can do that by just clicking this proposal, and then it's fixed, as you can see here in the document. And this I do for all violations in my document. So not only terminology, but also all problems I encounter regarding my style guide. So here, for example, I use the future tense, but my company doesn't want that. They want me to use the present as often as possible, since the future tense is not appropriate for technical documentation. Here, some sentence end is missing. Here I use the passive voice, which I should also avoid according to this company. And yeah, I can go through all those issues, do my fixes either manually or by applying a proposal. And every time I fix something, it's instantly rechecked if maybe I violate some other rule according to my style guide. And when I do this, my document gets better and better, and I'm informed via this release level here how good the document quality currently is. So here we calculate based on the entire document size, how many very critical problems are still inside and how many not so critical problems are inside. And we give an evaluation from 0 to 100. So here we are already very close to 100, which means that the document is already quite safe, meaning that the problems which remain are not considered so critical by our company. So they are considered minor problems. Here we see, for example, a term problem which says that it depends on the context if improvement or upgrade is correct. So, and this is why it does not go so deep into the release level. So the quality does not diminish, because here as an author, I just have to decide, is improvement correct or is upgrade correct? And how do I do that? So this is actually something which is content dependent, right? So here, once again, our terminology panel can help us out. we can see we have now a lot more content. And here, for example, we see when I can use improvement and when I can use upgrade. So it says improvement is okay when, according to our terminology database, according to TermWeb, it's a process of reaching a state considered superior to a previous state. So that's my definition. So I know when I'm writing this context, if this definition is correct, then improvement is okay. Let's have a look at upgrade. So upgrade is okay if the definition matches replacement of a product with a more advanced version of the same product. And now I know those two definitions. I know when I'm allowed to use upgrade. I know when I'm allowed to use improvement. And now I can easily decide which one is correct. And I can see that in this case, improvement is correct. So I can just ignore this one and move to the next issue. And I can go on here until I reach 100%. This is what this electronic style guide does. It completely integrates the terminology and does terminology research inside the terminology database in real time while you create content. And this really helps you to work very closely with your terminology database without you having to do something manually. You don't have to check terminology database manually. You don't have to check if something exists or not. The system knows by default because it does those checkups all the time. So just while you write. So you always have the most current information, how good your document is and how close you are to the term database in the background. Okay, Congree also has additional functionality, which I also would like to briefly mention. It's not so far away from what we do regarding terminology, but it is sentence-based. So while you write, Congree offers you similar sentences which are stored inside of a sentence database. This helps you increase consistency not only on a word level regarding terminology, but also on a sentence level. So you get entire sentences which have been approved in the past and which are good enough to be used in the future. So they have to match, they have to reach a certain quality level that they are stored in the sentence database. And this works like this. So I can write something like congratulations. And just by writing this, I get some sort of autocomplete, which tells me there is a sentence in the database which contains the word congratulations. Is this the one you wanted to use? And then I can just click it, and it's completely proposed and completely added into the document. So the entire sentence is now already written in the document, meaning that I have created a sentence which is useful for me, which actually explains what I wanted to explain, but I didn't have to create it from scratch. I didn't use different wording. I used exactly the wording I used last time or some colleague of mine used last time. This is especially helpful if you're doing a lot of translations, because then, of course, you want to express the same ideas always with the same sentences, so that pre-translation can actually already do the translation of the sentences and you don't have additional translation costs for this content. But it's also useful for you as an author, because if you reuse those sentences, you can be sure that there are no negative terms inside, that it does not violate the style guide, and you can just apply it into your document and you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you write something. Okay, this functionality is accompanied by an additional panel which we can show, where all sentences are collected which are not yet in the system and are not yet known by Congree. And all those sentences are collected, and you're told if those sentences can be stored or not. So it's very similar to what we saw in the term candidates feature, this one. So we get a sentence which is completely new and which is good enough, so it doesn't contain any major mistakes. And I can actually send it and make it available for other authors in the future. And I have another sentence, this one, which contains some problem, and it does not reach the release level necessary for the sentence to be stored. So I cannot store it. I cannot make it available to my colleagues. So what I would have to do first is to do some correction. And the same we have here. So once again, the sentence is not correct like that. It reaches a release level from 89. I need 90 for a sentence to be sent, so it's not available to me. But all the other sentences which I have corrected or are correct enough, I can actually propose them and make them instantly available to all the other authors which are also working with the system. And I mentioned this before, we have a lot of editing environments, so we are not limited to your CMS. We are not limited to Word. So this also goes for Outlook. This also goes for PowerPoint. This goes for InDesign. So you can have access to those standard sentences, to those standardized sentences everywhere where you create content. And the same goes for terminology. So you have one terminology database and you can access it wherever you create content, because Congree directly integrates into those editing environments. Yeah, this is the overview I wanted to give you. So Congree has, to summarize, a electronic style guide, which includes your terminology. So if you're using TermWeb, it integrates with TermWeb directly. You can participate in the terminology lifecycle. You can propose your terms, because you're the first one who creates new content, who touches new content. So it's a good point to start collecting terminology. We have the terminology research functionality, which allows you to see all information which is stored in TermWeb for each term which you match, or for each term where you make some mistake. And we have the sentence reuse functionality, which allows you to reuse material which is correct and has correct terminology which has been created in the past. And you can add new sentences to the system for your colleagues or for your future self. Okay, now we have time for your questions regarding the integration or the combination of TermWeb and Congree. So feel free to ask your questions, and Gustav and I will gladly answer them all. I saw that there already are some questions, so maybe I read them aloud and then we can decide who answers them. So the first question is, does Congree work for all languages, and how good? Congree, the same as TermWeb, Congree can integrate with different systems, and depending on the system with which you integrate, you have a different number of languages which are supported. For what you saw today, the integration with TermWeb, we have this for 2 languages, for English and for German. And this integration does not only ask TermWeb, is there a term available? It can also recognize variants. It can recognize different number. It can recognize different word forms. So it doesn't really matter how the term is written in the term database. We linguistically analyze it and can recognize variants automatically. So it works really well. It's something, if you're interested in, you should really try. It's a very sophisticated linguistic engine, which is capable of recognizing what is your word stem and what do you actually want to say, and if is something similar already available in the sentence database. So we don't use some similarity algorithm which says, okay, one symbol is different, so maybe it's the same. We use a linguistic approach which recognizes based on the word if it's something similar or not. Okay, we have another question. Does Congree Authoring Memory work with Oxygen XML? Yes, it does. We support Oxygen, the Oxygen XML editor, the Oxygen author, and we are working on the Oxygen web integration, but this currently only works for the style guide, not for the authoring memory. Okay, can I include the STE rules to the system? Yes, you can. So Congree supports issue 7 of STE completely. I think I actually have it here. No, I don't have it here, but I can maybe briefly fire up XMetal so that I can show you how this looks like. It should be available in XMetal. In XMetal, I have some detailed documentation where I can briefly show you how the STE checker works. So if you have the STE rules available and you want to use them, you have normally a rule set which you can select. In my case, this is simply called STE. I select this here, and if I check my document now, it's checked according to the STE rules. So the system checks, am I allowed to use certain words? Did I use words with the correct meaning? And all the other STE rules which actually exists and it can be checked by a machine. So, and you will get the feedback here. So let's maybe deactivate this rule. It's not so interesting. And here we see, for example, consider rewriting using the following alternatives. We should use better because the verb improve is not approved. And you get all these SDE messages here. And of course, not only the word rules, but also all the style rules which are included in SDE. So Congree offers complete SDE support. Okay, more questions. Can I buy Congree from Interverbum, or do I need 2 contracts? This I actually cannot answer.
I don't think we actually have decided on the exact format of the contracts. This is the release webinar, but hopefully we will be able to just buy as an add-on.
All right, more questions. Can you filter in Congree language check for style and terminology separately? I mean, you can do several things here. What we saw before is you can focus on style rules directly. So I can just hide other categories and focus on style completely. This is something I can do as an author. If I want, for example, to start fixing all my style issues and later concentrate on my terminology issues. This is all something you can always do. But what you can also do is, as an administrator, you can provide different rule sets for your authors. And depending on the job you're doing as an author, it can contain different check mechanisms. So you can set up a rule set which, for example, only checks terminology. You can set up a rule set which only checks specific terminology from TermWeb. So maybe just one specific section or terminology for a specific use case. Or you can have a rule set which only does style checking. So this is completely up to you. You can do this centrally as an administrator. And as a user, as an author, you also have possibility to hide certain categories you don't want to work on directly. Of course, hiding a category does not increase your score. So you still have to fix the issues which exist, but you can focus on certain issues first. Okay, so currently I don't see any more questions. Okay, there's another question. How much of your tool can be used to write user interfaces? To use Congree and to use TermWeb inside of Congree, you need to use a editing environment in which Congree can integrate. So previously I showed you this one slide which shows all the editing environments in which Congree integrates. It's just one part of the editing environments in which we integrate. And Congree needs to support one of those for Congree to work. If you're creating contents in an editing environment which is not listed here, it's best to ask us, because Congree also has several APIs which you can use, which you can integrate into your editing environment if you're creating content somewhere else. Congree has a web interface which can be integrated in all websites. So there's almost always a solution to check content with Congree in your editing environment. This is basically our main reason for existing, that we are able to integrate in many different editing environments, so that you get your terminology check and your style check wherever you need it. Okay, another question. Is it possible to import or export the entries from the term database into another format or file? Gustav.
Yes, yes, you can. Currently support, I mean, of course, Excel, both import and export. We also support TBX, which is standard, and XML, multi-term XML. Of course, if you use export that into other systems, you can probably create any number of files.
So it looks like our viewers ran out of questions. So if you have any questions left, don't be scared. You have another 5 minutes to get rid of your questions. Of course, if you come up with questions later, feel free to contact us, and we will gladly answer all your questions via mail as well. And if there are no questions left, this leaves me with thanking you all for joining us today. Thank you for your interest in our solution. Thank you to Gustav for taking the time and showing us this incredible TermWeb webflow and whatever you can do there to build up your terminology. It's really impressive. And yeah, if you're interested in the solution, if you would like to try it out, feel free to contact any of us, and yeah, maybe we hear from you in the future. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and a big thank for you, Phil, for leading the presentation. So unless there's anything more, I guess we'll finish for today.
Goodbye all.
Goodbye all, and have a nice evening or morning in case you're on the west side of the.
Have a nice day. Yeah.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.